Yo guys, welcome to the Zelda fiction. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got banished and becomes the leader of West Empire? Part 2. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Naruto nodded to the referees to take over as he walked into the shade together with the other contestants, most of whom looked shocked that he would be participating. Before we begin the battles, the first of 4 referees began speaking, quietening the crowd somewhat. Allow us to explain the rules and proceedings for the upcoming battles. She was a tall blonde brown-eyed woman wearing a dark blue dark green uniform that many recognized as the uniform of the Civil Services Office. This was Riza Hawkeye, a former soldier who retired when her home country joined the Empire. She was one of the higher-ranked members of the CSO, her role being primarily to train the new recruits in handling firearms and not shoot themselves, as was the case quite often. 1. Killing is prohibited. Should that happen, charges will be pressed according to given circumstances. The second referee said. This was Laxus Dreher, who was not participating because he lost a rock-paper-scissors match against Natsu of all people. Even now, 2 months after said match, Murahan still didn't let him forget it, that damn demon. 2. The initial matches will all take part 4 at a time. The third referee announced, as 4 large squares around the arena floor, including where the referees were standing, rose a couple of feet up. The referee was a red and black-themed swordsman who carried a massive sword on his back. His hair was black and he had sharp orange eyes and a wide-brimmed hat. This was Dracul Mihik, current holder of the title of strongest swordsman and a former pirate who now ran a floating dojo that taught lots of things from swordsmanship to hand-to-hand combat to staff fighting. 3. Each platform will be surrounded by a barrier, however, it is ill-advised for the participants to actively try to destroy said barriers, as their main function is to protect the spectators. The fourth referee, Makarov Dreher, said. 4. Crippling injuries, depending on severity, can be considered by the referee as a reason to call the match in favor of the attacker. Riza said. This also means that you will listen to the referee. Failure to do so can lead to expulsion from the entire tournament. As the 4 referees moved to their assigned platforms, a 5th person walked into the middle. In order to break the ice, His Majesty the Emperor has allowed a demonstration match to be held between him and anyone who wishes to test himself against the Guardian of Yggdrasil. The newcomer said. This was Najenda wearing a form-fitting black army uniform adorned with numerous medals and insignias. Participants of the first tournament are discouraged to volunteer to prevent the possibility of handicap matches. Bro that. Came echoing from the Konoha participants as Sasuke strode forward as if he owned the world. I'll show that I am superior than your fake emperor and that he has no right to sit on my throne. Uchiha. Stand down, now. Came the call from Torin, one of Danzo's bodyguards. Fu and Danzo had noticed the effect Sasuke's words had on the general populace, who were glaring at the little shy the Uchiha. Danzo meanwhile shook his head with a sigh. Sasuke had always been a handful, even when Tsunade was still Hokage. No. I've been held back enough. I shall show the world that the Uchiha clan is still the most powerful. Sasuke said, flipping him the finger. Next to Danzo, the other Kages looked at him with a microgram of pity. You should have kept that one on a tight leash, Hokage. Inoki stated. Unfortunately, he was like that before I took office. Danzo said. More like stole the hat, Darui muttered, lower than anyone could hear. Najenda turned to Naruto, who nodded before unclipping his robe, revealing leather armor covering his upper body, shoulders and waist. On his forearms were long metal braces and he wore similar equipment on his legs. On his hands were armored gauntlets and he wore a sword on his waist. Lastly, his face was still covered by his mask and his hat. Hinata giggled, looking forward the humiliation that was to come, and because the guards behind her were taking bets on how many moves Naruto would need to defeat Sasuke. As Naruto and Sasuke faced each other from across the platform, Najenda stood between them. You two have heard the rules. Your Majesty, you ready? She asked. Naruto nodded. Participant Uchiha, are you ready? Najenda asked. Sasuke grunted, arms crossed. Okay then fight. Najenda said before jumping back. You should just give, Sasuke said, before noticing that the Emperor was no longer standing before him. No, he was sitting and sipping tea. You spend so much time talking nonsense that I had enough time to brew some tea. Naruto told him. Seriously, you are so slow that it's no wonder why you can't regrow your clan. Your partner must have gotten bored of you by the time you got going. You dare, Sasuke roared as he charged the Emperor, who dodged him with ease, still sipping his tea without spilling a drop. Is that all? Naruto asked, getting bored. Is this really all the so-called strongest is capable of? Shut up and die. Sasuke roared before sending a fireball at Naruto, who simply swatted it away using his teaspoon and a generous amount of chakra. Honestly, Naruto began speaking, getting everyone's attention. I am surprised you have made it this far in life. The end will be quick. I shall give you the honor that it will be an Eastern technique that I have been taught that I will use to defeat you. Just die already. Sasuke said, feinting and sending a punch at the Emperor only to phase right through him and after image. Hit into Judo Aogi. Naruto said, appearing behind Sasuke with his hands in a tiger sign. Sasuke saw the next few minutes in painful slow motion. He was familiar with the technique he instinctively knew was coming. Senengarashi. Naruto sent Sasuke crashing through the barrier, screaming. Everyone in the stadium winced, a few from past trauma of having been on the receiving end of that technique, whilst others winced from seeing Sasuke break through the barrier. However, the majority winced because of the sound that came out of Sasuke's mouth, had no business coming out of a male's mouth. Winner, His Majesty the Emperor. Negenda announced. And someone go fetch that young man an ice pack. Shortly afterwards. Now that we are back to where we need to be, let's decide the matchups. Negenda announced as a covered box was brought to her. She put her hand under the cover and grabbed 2 slips of paper after making a show of mixing the contents. And Chijuro from Kurigakure and Berserker Naruka, please go to platform 1. Negenda called out before repeating the previous process 3 more times. Amoy and Temari were sent to platform 2, Gimli son of Gloin and the Kirinon wielding the Kabutoari were sent to platform 3, and Guy and one of the Iwa Jonin went to platform 4. I apologize in advance, but I am no good at writing multiple prolonged battles, so the battles as such won't be highly detailed, but I will do my best nonetheless. Also, I have compiled a list of combatants and literally rolled a couple of dice to make the matchups to ensure some form of randomness. Platform 1. Chijuro and Naruka looked at each other, Naruka giving him a blank stare, whilst Chijuro was busy keeping his nerves under control. Chill the heck out already. Naruka suddenly snapped, making the poor Miss Swordsman nearly literally jumped out of his shoes. You're so tense it is annoying. I can't help it, he said. Both of you ready? Riza asked. Naruka nodded whilst Chijuro gave a hesitant one. Then, fight. Chijuro immediately jumped backwards and was grateful for it when Naruka appeared where he had stood, a golden gauntlet with long sharp claws on her hands that he had not seen before, the ground shattered under her golden gauntlet-clad fist. Where did those come from? Chijuro wondered, looking at said gauntlets, seeing the equally golden spikes claws on them. Next thing he knew, he was dodging the claws that shot out together with chains, trying to ensnare him. Garamekure Kaiho, he shouted, his sword glowing blue as the bandages shredded. At the same time, he battered away all 8 chains that were heading for him. Behind you, chum. He suddenly heard behind him and twitched. Shy was all he said before 2 more chains appeared and wrapped him up. Before he could utter another word, he was lifted up and slammed into the ground, head first multiple times. With one final throw, she buried him in the hard platform, his lower body, still visible above the ground, twitched sporadically. When he didn't move any more than that, Naruka crouched down next to him and began poking him with a stick that she pulled out of her cleavage. Naruto still wonders. A. Why the hell she carries a stick there, and B. What else she hides in there, since he saw her pull out something akin to a baseball bat from there, then a complete first aid kit, then a stuffed teddy bear, and lastly that what she was actually looking for, a bottle of strong sake which she used to disinfect some poor bugger's wounds. Gramps, I think he's out. She commented. Couldn't you have held back even a bit? Riza asked. No. His twitching pissed me off. She answered. Twitchy bastard would jump at each and every mouse that scurries along his path. Riza sighed before proclaiming Naruka as the winner. Meanwhile, in the stands, Mate Terumi sighed at seeing her aide defeated with relative ease. He was a good fighter, but only once his blood got going and he got his confidence together, which took longer than what his opponent gave him. Something tells me that this will be a trend for the fighters from the West, Inoki, that Tsuchikage said, before looking at platform 4, where his Jonin was currently getting his ass handed to him by someone who was easily one of the foremost Taijutsu masters in the entirety of the Eastern lands. Platform 2. Laxus looked at the 2 contestants, simply nodded, and told them, well, get on with it. I'll intervene when things go too far. The heck is that supposed to mean? The wielder of the Kabutoari asked. I mean, how can someone as short as shit? He screamed as Gimli's twin-headed battle axe cut a deep groove into the hard ground where he stood and subsequently followed up with sharp and powerful swings from his backup when that axe got stuck. Never underestimate a dwarf. Gimli said, blocking a strike from the shinobi, only for his current weapon to be cut in 2 when the Kirin slammed the hammer portion of his weapon onto the back of the cleaver axe. Interesting, Gimli said as he delivered a strong punch into the Kirin's face, sending him reeling back. And weak. Was added as he walked over to his prized battle axe and wrenched it out. Weak. My weapon just destroyed yours. The Kirin said. Only because I hadn't known about the limitations to that weapon of yours. Gimli said, gripping his axe with both hands and charging forward. Sparks flew as the two bladed weapons collided, but before the hammer could connect, Gimli disengaged and watched as the Kirin sent his cleaver axe deep into the ground, getting lodged in the process. Next thing he knew, the Kirin had the sharp blade of Gimli's axe at his throat. "Winner, Gimli, son of Gloin," Laxus declared. "How? The ground should have been destroyed by my weapon," he said. "My people have helped create these platforms. They are made from a special mortar that is hard yet can be easily pierced or cut. We use it ourselves in our own training fields since it is easier to repair since we just pour in some more of the mortar instead of having to fill in entire craters," Gimli explained, helping the Kirin to dislodge his weapon from the ground. "On the downside if things like this happen, it's a pain in the ass to get the weapons out." Platform 3. Tamari and Amoy looked at each other, each going over what they knew of the other. Amoy knew that Tamari was a long-ranged wind specialist with a habit of just about sending anyone flying whom she believes is hitting on her. He also knew that he could negate her advantage of range somewhat thanks to the restrictions of the platform. Tamari on the other hand only knew that Amoy was a close-range melee fighter who uses predominantly lightning attacks. Theoretically, if she maintained her distance, she should hold the advantage. "Are the two of you ready?" Mihik asked. Neither contestant nodded, too focused on the opponent to hear him. Sighing, he looked at Naruto, who threw him an alarm clock set to go off in 15 seconds. "What do I do with this?" Mihik asked, before reading the note attached to the clock. "Tuck this between them, then get out of the barrier." So he did and 5 seconds later was glad that he did because it exploded with a loud bang. Fortunately for everyone else in the arena, the sound was all but nullified by the barrier around the platform and all they saw was a small burst of smoke and two shinobi who were on the ground clutching their heads. "Now that you two are paying attention, you can begin whenever you want," he said, getting nods from the two combatants once they recovered. Amoy immediately charged Tamari, who jumped back and began gliding on her fan, but he followed her, charging his sword with electricity that he sent at Tamari, who blocked it with a wall of wind. "Nice try," Tamari said with a smirk. "You will have to move faster than that, Slowpoke." This from someone who once lost to a lazy guy? Amoy asked, making Tamari flinch. Shikamaru saw the flinch and muttered that Amoy had just made a big mistake. Something that both Gaara and Kankuro mirrored. Sure enough, Amoy found himself hard-pressed when Tamari decided to go on the offensive. "Don't you dare bring that up, you bastard." Tamari growled and Amoy realized that he should have maybe kept his mouth shut for once. Only to begin his usual conversation listing every worst-case scenario he could think of, giving Tamari enough time to close her fan, get in close, and begin beating the crap out of him. Off to the side, Carrie and Samui sighed and face-palmed in well-experienced unison as Tamari sent Amoy into unconscious oblivion until Mihik stopped her, proclaiming her the winner. Platform 4. Ai and the Iwa Jonin glared at each other. Despite not being at war with each other or having had any direct conflict with each other since the Third Great Shinobi War, however, this animosity was deeply ingrained from decades of warfare between the two nations. "The two of you ready?" Makarov asked. When both nodded, he called, "Then, begin." "Flame of Youth." Guy roared, rushing his opponent, who leapt back in an attempt to make space whilst going through hand signs. "Oten." "Domu," he said as his skin turned near black. The moment he landed he was grateful that he knew that technique because he felt Guy's kick that connected with his chin. As he flipped over, he used the momentum to try and kick Guy in return. Both fighters landed in a heap but quickly got back to their feet. They continued to trade blows until Guy managed to subtly lead his opponent into a corner before opening the first gate and delivering a series of lightning strikes that sent the Iwa Jonin flying off the platform. "Winner by ring out, Might Guy of Konoha," Makarov announced before watching Guy approach the Iwa Jonin, who was getting back to his feet. "That was a most youthful fight. Let's have another one when circumstances allow it," he said loudly, holding out a hand. "I'd rather not," his opponent said, taking the hand and pulling himself up. "If it weren't for my jutsu, I am sure that my neck would be broken by now, to say nothing of the rest of my bones that you punched and kicked. Or you could just sit down and have a beer," Makarov said, making both of them jump as they had not realized that he had moved up right next to him. "What a youthful idea, little old man," Guy boomed. Meanwhile, up in the stands, Inoki was shaking his head at the madness that was going on down below, the madness known as Konoha and Iwa Shinobi, getting along over something as insignificant as a drink. A few minutes later, Naruto rejoined Hinata in their booth where she rewarded his victory with a long kiss, thankfully hidden by the fly netting that had been put up whilst the first round of fights were going on. "Did you enjoy defeating him?" she asked. "I was honestly expecting more of a fight, goes to show just how strong we have become since arriving in the West," he answered. "And is it just me, or is that your little sis over there being approached by that one pickup artist?" She turned and saw that it was indeed Hanabi and that she was indeed next pickup artist, one whom she recognized. "Oh no, he doesn't," she said and rushed out of the room, pausing when Naruto called over to her. "You going to kill them?" he asked. "Nah, just give them a lesson they'll never forget," she said before motioning two of their guards to follow her. Naruto sighed before turning his attention back to the fights, where the next set of fighters were being drawn by Negenda. The second set of fighters are Uchiha Sasuke of Konoha vs. "Did you enjoy defeating him?" she asked. "I was honestly expecting more of a fight, goes to show just how strong we have become since arriving in the West," he answered. "And is it just me, or is that your little sis over there being approached by that one pickup artist?" She turned and saw that it was indeed Hanabi and that she was indeed next pickup artist, one whom she recognized. "Oh no, he doesn't," she said and rushed out of the room, pausing when Naruto called over to her. "You going to kill them?" he asked. "Nah, just give them a lesson they'll never forget," she said before motioning two of their guards to follow her. Naruto sighed before turning his attention back to the fights, where the next set of fighters were being drawn by Negenda. The second set of fighters are Uchiha Sasuke of Konoha vs. Chapter 6, Tournament Part 3. "A from Kumo," Negenda announced. "Would both combatants please head over to the first arena?" She then drew another set of papers. "Brave Fullbuster and Izumi Curtis, please head over to Arena 2," Negenda announced. Izumi walked over to her position, confidence clear by her stride alone. Gray not so much, he hoped that he would remain conscious enough to witness the rest of the fights. "Mifune of Tetsu and Lord Irachi of the Samurai Order, please go to Arena 3," Negenda called out. Mifune was an old man wearing old samurai armor, with long gray hair and an equally long beard. Irachi was a middle-aged man with midnight black hair, cut short, and a neat goatee. 1. Natsu Dragneel and Akeuki of Nadeshiko, please go over to Arena 4. Negenda called out. "I'm fired up," Natsu yelled as he sprinted over to the arena, his opponent taking her time to walk over instead. "Let the second round of matches be." Negenda was interrupted by a shrill scream coming from the audience. 5 minutes earlier. Hanabi sighed, trying her best to ignore the advances of the not-so-gentleman next to her. She was on her way back from buying a drink for herself and her friend, Mogi, when the guy walked up to her and began lavishing her in praises, with another equally not-so-gentlemanly pickup artist doing the same to Mogi. "Why did it have to be me?" she asked herself as the guy started throwing a new set of compliments at her. "Look, I am not interested, so. At least let me try to change your mind, oh beautiful mountain flower," he interrupted her. Why is she being so difficult? She is almost as stubborn as the Empress, back before she got married to that little punk who became the Emperor, lucky prick. Hanabi's response was interrupted by someone clearing their throat behind them. "I'd appreciate it if you had heeded my warning from all those years ago, Mr. Unable to score with the ladies." Hanabi, Mogi and the two pickup artists turned, the former's face brightening upon seeing who it was, the second one beeping an eyebrow, since she seemed to recognize the woman who had spoken, and the latter too paling, before the second pickup artist disappeared as fast as he could, the first however frozen in fear, remembering her threat from back then. Short flashback, 3 months before Hinata and Naruto's marriage. "I swear," Hinata said, holding the pickup artist's throat with one hand, whilst holding a rusty hatchet in the other. "If I find you hitting on another girl in my presence or line of sight again, I'll have your balls removed and fed to the dogs." Flashback end. The pickup artist still had nightmares of that day. Do I know you?" he asked, trying to feign ignorance. "Not me personally, no," Hinata answered before motioning one of her guards forward. "But I believe that the two of you will be well acquainted after this." The guard took of her helmet, revealing shoulder-length white hair and emerald green eyes. "Sir Cyrilla Fiona Elin Rhiannon, 2, by order from the Empress, you are free to deliver just punishment on this person," Hinata said in a clear voice. Siri grinned whilst the poor man slunk away, only to be grabbed by Hanabi and Mogi. "What's the matter?" Hanabi asked in a cutesy voice. "I thought you wanted to spend time with a pretty lady," Mogi added, unable to keep a smirk from her face. "Here is one trying to spend some quality time with you now." If possible, the man paled even further. Siri had a reputation for having never failed to hospitalize each and every playboy, pickup artist, thug, thief and rapist that crossed her path, except for maybe the very first, because he allegedly was never heard from again. All she ever said about that one was a specialist took care of him. And now, he was in her crosshairs, so he did the only thing that he could think of: scream like a little bitch for help and mercy. Back in the arenas. "As I was about to say before that man-woman interrupted, let the matches begin," Negenda announced as though nothing weird had happened. Arena 1. Sasuke glared at A, who huffed and appeared to not take this seriously. "You will lose this battle, old man," Sasuke growled as he called upon his chakra. "If you intend to bore me to death, then yes." A said, riling Sasuke up to great effect. With a roar, Sasuke charged in, Chidori chirping as he intended to finish it quickly. Only to be blindsided by A, who caught his hand in a lightning-clad hand of his own, neutralizing Sasuke's lightning. Trying to use a lightning jutsu against the undisputed master of lighting users in all of the elemental nations, you have some guts. A grunted. Maybe you aren't as weak as your match against the Emperor made you to appear. That jutsu managed to nick my skin. Sasuke growled as he tried to kick A, only for him to catch that as well, before surprising A by firing a point-blank, full-powered fireball into his face. Sasuke smirked, thinking he had gotten him. You little shit. A roared as Sasuke suddenly found himself being thrown through the air and out of the arena bounds. You singed my beard. Do you have any idea how long it takes for the smell of burned hair to disappear? The smoke cleared to reveal A standing there in his full body Raiden no Yoroi, with the tip of his goatee singed black. Winner by ring out, A from Kumagakure. Riza announced, whilst Sasuke, furious at the loss and at the fact that his sneak attack did so little damage, stomped away, swearing vengeance for this humiliation. While he was walking, he overheard some of the civilians say that Ichihiga's combo was excellent. Indeed, his opponent, whilst clearly far more experienced than him, was still caught off guard and failed to get that defensive technique of his up in time. A second civilian said. It helped ease Sasuke's anger somewhat, but not enough to care. Arena 2. Laxus felt a pint of sympathy at the brutal beatdown that was happening in front of him. Gray had started out by coating the entire floor in ice before sending several icicles at his opponent, one of the few people with whom he, Laxus, has a good relationship with and still is scared shitless of. Reason being that his attacks were rendered useless when she transmuted the damn ground she was standing on into lightning rods, then proceeded to do to him what she was currently doing to Gray. Clapping her hands, Izumi transmuted the ice and ground she was standing on into a wall that protected her from the projectiles and clamping his feet and lower legs in transmuted granite. The hell, Gray asked, then realized that Izumi had closed the distance between them. Rule number 1. Never give your opponent the chance to fight back. She said, then proceeded to literally tie Gray's arms and legs into some strange semblance of a human Gordian knot. Rule number 2. Shut up. I am still speaking. Izumi shouted at Gray, who was roaring in pain. Winner by tying her opponent up literally, Izumi Curtis. Laxus announced. Now, please untie him. He got tied up by a housewife, he should be able to untie himself. Izumi called out, earning many cheers and confirmations from the crowd. Arena 3. The battle between the two samurai was, for lack of a better term, a deadly dance, graceful in its fluidity, strong in its movements, and deadly should either one of the contestants make a single mistake. Mifune and Orochi were trading, dodging and parrying the other's blows before, at some unknown signal, both jumped back and both caught their breath with the biggest smiles on their faces that anyone had ever seen. It has been many decades since I have faced an opponent such as yourself. Mifune said. Likewise is what I would like to say. Orochi answered. Unfortunately, I last faced someone of your caliber just over a year ago. I was just beginning to get used to the piece. Nearby, Mihawk was grinning. He enjoyed it when swordsmen spoke to each other truthfully and with respect. He gained some respect for the Eastern Samurai because he himself knew just how strong Orochi was. He considered Orochi to be one of the top 50 swordsmen in the West. He could safely say that Mifune was Orochi's equal, despite their age difference. Soon, the two samurai resumed their deadly dance, sparks flew as their blades connected, and then just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped, with Mifune's sword a hair's breadth away from Orochi's neck, whilst Orochi's sword pointing at a gap he had cut into Mifune's armor, where his kidneys were located. "Yes, we tie," Mifune said, with Orochi nodding in agreement as both withdrew their swords in unison and sheathed them, giving each other a bow of respect. As the two of them bowed to each other, Mihawk announced, since the rules do not take into account a draw, I have no idea how to proceed. The verdict shall be given after the other fights have been resolved. Arena 4. Akiyuki looked at Natsu, trying to gauge his overall capabilities. From his outward appearance, she estimated him to be a physically fit specimen of a man, and she just realized what she had been thinking, which tinted her face a rosy pink. Well, then, you may begin when ready. Makarov said, before stepping to the side. Why do you smell so funny? Are you on your period? Natsu asked. Yes, wait, what? Akiyuki turned bright red, before charging Natsu. Die. Her charge came to a screeching halt when she saw Natsu engulf his hands in flames, her instinct shrieking at her not to get hit by those flames. What now? I've been waiting for you to come charge in so we could brawl it out, but you just stop. Natsu groaned. But I am a little girl. Akiyuki said, giving him her best attempt at the puppy eye jutsu. Don't you know it is bad manners to hit a lady with fire and flames? Ulasana and Lucy both said something about that some time ago, Natsu said, apparently thinking, his flames dispersing. Inwardly, Akeuchi was smirking in victory until what Natsu said next shattered all her preconceptions about him. But they never said anything about fire and flame and lighting, he said with a blinding smile, as his whole body was consumed by fire and lighting. Under flame dragon's roar, Natsu bellowed as a typhoon of fire and lighting sent her flying into the barrier. Winner by ring out, Natsu Dragneel. Makarov announced. Wendy, can you heal her up? Humming, master. A young blue-haired girl ran up. She arrived to see Akeuchi crying her heart out. What the hell is with the people in this land? I want to go home, she cried. There. Natsu Nai was just being himself. Wendy counseled her as she began healing her injuries. What the hell is he though? And are you his sister? Why would he go all out in a spar, especially with a girl like me? Akeuchi continued. Natsu and I are not siblings, but he is a brother all the same. Wendy said with a smile. And he was actually going easy on you. And it doesn't matter to him whom he fights, he never backs down from a fight except for maybe his two girlfriends, and Urza-san and Master Makarov. Akeuchi wanted to deny reality right then, but couldn't. Fuck this shit, I am so gonna stay away from the West forever. She thought to herself. Even if they have some crazy hot people here, even if they would dare to hit a Lady Kami, where have I gone wrong in life? But the other contestants. Despite her fellow Nadeshiko Kunoichi's defeat, Shizuka couldn't help but smile. I should have sent her here earlier. She said. Why's that? Naruka asked from her seat next to her. Akeuchi is an oddball amongst Nadeshiko Kunoichi. Shizuka answered. She strongly believes in the Nadeshiko way of only allowing stronger men to marry her and all that, but at the same time, she also believes that men aren't supposed to hit women. At least be glad that she fought in a tournament then. Naruka said. Cause should she have joined us during the Civil War, she'd be dead by now. Speaking from experience? Shizuka asked. I only joined Ani-san later, but even the handful of battles I partook in were brutal to say the least. Trust me when I say this, but war has no place for simplistic gender superiority bullshit mentally, gentleman shit believing types like her. Naruka pulled back the strap on her shoulder to reveal a scar running over her shoulder. I got this during my first battle here in the West. Bastard got me good with that fucking halberd of his, gouged out a good chunk there. If it weren't for the blue-haired pipsqueak little sis tending to your comrade there, I'd have lost my arm. What was she doing on the battlefield? Shizuka asked, pointing at Wendy. She's stronger than she looks. Despite her size and age, if she gets serious, there are very few amongst the contestants here who can hold their own against her, myself included. She is truly a master of the winds. Naruka said with a smile. Unlike the rest of her brothers, she actually uses her head instead of her fists. Brothers? Shizuka asked. People like Natsu. Beat the shit out of you first, ask questions later types, all of them. Naruka explained. Probably why I get along with them so well. Back in the arena. Now that this round is complete, we have met an impasse. Mihik announced. Since the match between Lord Irachi and Lord Mifune ended in a draw, it is time to decide who continues to the next round. For that decision, the Emperor has ordered me to leave the decision up to you spectators. Loud roars and shouts for both contestants erupted from the stands as people began chanting both Mifune and Irachi's name. You know what? At Mihik's words, the cheers stopped dead. Let's just let both of them through to the next round for a three-way cause, otherwise you lot will just keep chanting until the day is over. Mihik said. They have shown that they both deserve to be in the next round after all. Agreed. Naruto called out, which was mirrored by many of the spectators. Agenda stepped forward again to draw names. Samui of Kumo and Monkey D. Luffy, please head over to Arena 1. She called out. Shizuka of Nadeshiko and Inyazuka Kiba from Konoha, please go to Arena 2. B from Kumo and Nobari, 3 from Kiri, please go to Arena 3. The goal is Greenleaf of the Elves and Tetsu from Tetsu, please go to Arena 4. Nagenda called out the last match for the round. Arena 1. Shishishi. This should be fun. Never fought against a warrior from the east before. Luffy said. Likewise. Samui answered in a near apathetic voice. Thank the log he's not looking at my chest. Then immediately became irked when she saw his neck stretch and corkscrew, all the while looking at her. Arena 2. Let's go, Akamaru, let's show this bitch who is the alpha. Kiba said, with Akamaru barking in response. What do you mean I have a death wish? Number BARK number. Are you kidding me? Kiba turned pale. If I win, I'll be. We have an agreement with the West that rule doesn't apply here. Shizuka said. Besides, you are not the type of person whom I'd consider in the first place as I already am looking for someone else. Who? Kiba asked, sighing in relief. A student of the Gama Sennin. Shizuka answered. He made a pact with my sensei that their students would finish their duel at a later stage. With Naruto. Naruto turned to Jiraiya, who was pointedly looking elsewhere whilst whistling. What did you do? he asked. I may or may not have snuck into Nadeshiko to do some research about 20 years ago. Jiraiya confessed after Tsunade leveled a frosty glare at him. The leader of the time caught up to me after I had made my escape and challenged me to a duel for her hand in marriage. Despite not taking it seriously, we were evenly matched and destroyed a large part of the forest around us when I called of the match in favor of letting our students finish it. In other words, you didn't want to be bogged down by a marriage, despite being in your utopia? Tsunade asked. Guilty as charged. Jiraiya answered. This was back when I was still trying to garner your favor, before you and Dan became an item. And you didn't think about telling me this when you were teaching me? Naruto asked in a calm tone. It may have slipped my mind, Jiraiya answered weakly. He looked underneath the calm tone and wished he hadn't. You realize that should Shizuka request a battle with me for my hand in marriage, Hinata is going to neuter you, right? Naruto asked. Arena 3. I fly through the wind and sting like a bee. Shut the fuck up before I give you the iron claw. A roared at his brother's bad raps. Only for Nobari to start rapping as well, resulting in him and B having a rap battle, complete with funky hand motions and rap dancing. Oh gods, there are two of them now. Carrie and Amoy both whined whilst A was being restrained from delivering a double iron claw. Arena 4. At the neck and under the arms, Legolas said. Huh? Tetsu exclaimed. What you mean? Your armor is weak at the neck and under the arms. Legolas answered. I have fought against beasts that had the same weaknesses in their own armor. Back with Negenda. Let the battles begin. Negenda called out to the cheers of the crowd. Arena 1. Samui grabbed her Tanto and rushed at Luffy, who readies himself to punch her. Gomu Gomu no, he said. Samui heard her sixth sense go off in her head like an air horn. Pistol. Samui immediately stopped charging in and jumped to the side just as Luffy's arm extended, missing her by less than an inch. Rolling to the side, she returned to charging in, swinging her Tanto, only for it to be blocked by his arm, which now had taken on a black sheen. Sorry, but I can't afford to hold back here, he said, clenching his other fist. Hancock promised me an all-you-can-eat meat buffet if I win this tournament. Samui deadpanned, pausing for less than a heartbeat. It was all it took for the pain to happen. Gomu Gomu no Red Hawk. Samui was sent flying out of the arena, nearly hitting Legolas and Tetsu on her way past them, the two combatants sending glares at Luffy for interrupting them. Sorry. My bad. Luffy laughed off. Idiot Riza shook her head as she proclaimed Luffy the winner. Dr. Chopper, Miss Marvell, please tend to Miss Samui. But Chopper and Wendy. Let's see definite second-degree burn where Luffy hit her with a Red Hawk, possible concussion to the head and fracturing to the spine from impacting the arena wall. Chopper listed her outer injuries that he could immediately identify. Organs around the upper stomach show no signs of bleeding, just some bruising. Her brain and skull on the other hand appear to be alright. Some hairline fractures to her spine, but nothing some rest and treatment won't cure. Wendy said, her magic powering down. Let's get her to the shade where I can heal the bruised organs before Sensei takes a look at her. Chopper nodded before calling over a team of paramedics with a stretcher. Still Chopper turned to see Wendy suspiciously eyeing some of Samui's anatomy. What do they feed them in the east? Arena 2. It didn't take long for Kiba to decide that yes, he was having a bad day. Not only was his opponent very beautiful, but she also knew how to use her beauty to her advantage during a fight. By that, in Kiba's definition, she was fighting dirty. She was wearing a pencil skirt and Kiba got distracted each time she would try to kick him due to him seeing flashes of her panties. Her having a cleavage window didn't help him at all either. Up in the stands, his sister growled and muttered something about him. Deciding to pull out the big guns, Kiba and Akamaru tried to get Suga, however realized too late that Shizuka had laid out a trap for them, as 4 seals appeared around them in a square, already activated. Almost immediately, Kiba and Akamaru felt their chakra being suppressed. Well, shit. Kiba grunted. Proctor, I forfeit. I have no means of getting out of this trap seal. Winner by forfeit, Shizuka of Nadeshiko. Laxus announced. How the hell do you manage to understand seals and Fujitsu? Kiba asked Shizuka. I can't make heads or tails of even the most basic theories. I don't either. Shizuka answered. I just know how to use seals. Kiba nodded. Naruto. Shizuka raised an eyebrow at him. The man you're looking for. He was trained by Jiraiya of the Sannin for a period around 7 years ago. Kiba clarified. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. Shizuka's eyes widened. I guess you aren't that much of a horndog and actually have a head on your shoulders after all. Kiba growled as he and Akamaru walked away, with Akamaru barking a comment. Shut up, Akamaru. I know that. With Naruto. That damn Inuzuka, Jiraiya muttered, feeling his imminent doom approaching nearer and nearer. That's what you get for your actions. Tsunade said with a smirk as Naruto sent glares at both Jiraiya and Akiba, the one for organizing an impending conflict, the other for revealing his name. Arena 3. Mihik had never thought he'd feel sympathy for anyone who wasn't a swordsman until now. Never mind that the two contestants he was proctoring had turned a fighting battle into a bad rap battle. Both were supposedly swordsmen, given that one had 7 swords strapped to his back and the other one had a giant toothpick, but they seemed to have missed the memo, as when Mihik had signed up as a proctor. He specifically stated that he wouldn't partake in proctoring an art contest of any form other than two contestants artfully dancing around each other, artfully trying to either KO the other, throw the other out of the ring, or simply slice and dice the other one up. This bullshit right was not what he had signed up for. He and Nubari were deeply engrossed in a rap battle, supported by some wannabe judges on the side holding up random numbers ranging from 0 to 10. Stop your rapping and fight, roared, but the two were too deeply engrossed in their rapping to hear or care. If you don't start fighting right now, I'll have both of you subjected to more than just your respective leaders' punishments. Mihik growled, drawing his sword slightly to emphasize his point whilst blasting the two rappers point blank with haki. B and Nubari stared blankly at him before Nubari flourished his blade with a twirl, only to pale when B went second stage Biju cloak, 6 tails, going, sorry brew, this not on you. Gotta not make this a draw, lest I get subjected to the iron claw. And thus B smacked Nubari out of bounds. But I am sure if we look around, there be a Karak bar abound, how does that sound? He asked. Winner, the lame rapper from Kumo. Mihik announced, before batting B over to the contestant stand with his sheathed sword. Arena 4. Testu decided that he was not having a good day. Don't get him wrong, he enjoyed a good fight against a strong and honorable opponent. He just hated it when his opponent switched from ranged attack to melee faster than it takes to blink at random moments. For log's sake, Legolas was about to shoot him in the shoulder. The next thing Tetsu knew, there was his letter opener of a knife heading right for his spleen. Blocking that, he came face to face with an arrow. Dodging that. You get the idea. Screw this. Proctor, I forfeit. I am outclassed by him. He announced. You shouldn't feel upset. Legolas said, sheathing his weapons. You are strong enough to make me put in an effort there. You just need to learn not to think so much. Easy for you to say, young lad. Tetsu growled. Legolas smirked while someone in the contestant stand roared in laughter. I'll let you know that I am the oldest participant here, just a sprite over a few thousand years old in fact. Flash forward, that evening. Tetsu and the other samurai sat in their apartment's communal room. What do you think about your opponent? Mifune asked. He is a powerful warrior, though if all his kind age like he does, then I feel sorry for their men in general. Tetsu answered. Why is that? One of the other samurai asked. They say that women age like fine wine. But even fine wine turns to vinegar after a few hundred years, let alone a few thousand, Tetsu answered. Those women of there must be quite the sour bunch. Everyone who heard him just stared at him blankly. The Greenleaf was right, you really do think too much. Even Mifune joined the perfectly synchronized perfect deadpan comment. Flash forward end. Ladies and gentlemen, the next contestants are. Nagenda announced, fishing through the now half-empty barrel. Rock Lee of Konohagakure vs Hot Aki Kakashi, also from Konohagakure. Please head over to Arena 1. Yasha. Lee bellowed. I'll show the world my flames of youth. Kakashi simply walked over, little green book in his hand. Kuritsuchi from Iwagakure and Sagetsu from Kurigakure, please head over to Arena 2. Nagenda called out. Finally. I was getting tired of waiting. Kuritsuchi said. Sagetsu, you better not have been slacking off. The wielder of the Kiba blade said with a smirk. Else I will tell Mai-sama you have a thing for her. Shut it. Sagetsu growled, though he paled slightly. Sure, he had a small crush on his leader, however, at the same time he was scared shitless of her temper and her threats. Kankuro of Sunugakure and Yukata from Sunagakure, please go to Arena 3. Nagenda said. Kankuro and Yukata looked at each other and nodded. Lacely, Ryu from Iwagakure and Koyo from Tetsu, please head over to Arena 4. Meanwhile in the stands, Inoki was approached by a cloaked and hooded individual carrying a message. Lord Tsuchikage, the Emperor would like to invite you to the Royal Palace following today's tournaments. The man said with a bow. He said that you may bring up to 4 of your people if you so wish and apologizes for the abruptness of the invite. Tell the Emperor that I will accept, however, given my back, I may be late. Inoki answered. I'll inform him immediately. The man said and walked in the direction of the Emperor's booth. In said booth. Hinata followed by Hanabi entered the booth, big smiles on their faces. Mogi had decided to remain in the stands with the rest of the Konoha group, all but ordering Hanabi to spend some time with her sister, once she found out that they were sisters in the first place. Good day, Naruto Nai. She greeted Naruto, who smiled. Sup. Glad you didn't turn that chap into paste. You'll have to get in line for that. I believe Hinata has first dibs. He greeted her with a grin. Hanabi just stuck out her tongue, enticing a round of laughter. Arena 1. Kakashi and Lee looked at each other, serious expressions on their faces, with Kakashi having his Sharingan exposed. Just so you know, I shall not hold back, Kakashi-san. Lee said. Likewise. And I apologize in advance. Kakashi responded. You two ready? Riza asked. At their nods, she brought her hand down. Begin. Yasha Lee began, rushing Kakashi and engaging him with a furious taijutsu exchange. It didn't last long, because Kakashi tricked Lee into looking him in the eye and casting a gain jutsu on him, then throwing him out of the arena boundary before Lee could dispel the illusion. That's a cheat skill. Lee said, accepting Kakashi's hand. That's why I apologized in advance. Kakashi responded. Cause Guy said the same thing during our first spar following the third war. And in order to defeat you otherwise might end up crippling you, this was the quickest and safest method. Winner by ring out, Kakashi of Konohagakure. Rise announced. Arena 2. 2. Suigetsu said. Excuse me? Kuretsuchi asked. Laxus, who was about to start the match, paused, having a bad feeling about this. Your sex appeal, it's pretty low. Suigetsu said, drawing the giant cleaver from his back. Kuretsuchi became very quiet. In the stands. What is that idiot doing? One of the Kiri delegates asked. Riling her up. Aoi answered. Suigetsu excels in riling up his opponents, allowing him to utilize his clan's jutsu more readily whenever they make a mistake. Makes sense, though maybe he shouldn't have used that card though. Mei said. Why? What would be coming his way? Aoi asked. Feminine fury. Came the collaborative response from everyone around him. Back in Arena 2. You two are clearly ready, so allow me to at least get to safety before beginning. Laxa said, bringing his hand down and stepping back. He was dating Murahin after all. He knows all about feminine fury thanks to her periods. Good thing he did, because Kuretsuchi immediately began shooting Yoten. Quicklime jutsu at Suigetsu, who, after realizing what the orbs of white grey paste were, countered by spitting water bullets at the orbs, then using his sword sending them back at Kuretsuchi. Ought to do better than that, Missy. Suigetsu said, when suddenly his sword became heavy. Says the one who didn't realize that his sword is now covered in concrete. Kuretsuchi said with a triumphant smirk. When how? Suigetsu asked. My water bullets should have completely solidified your attack. Kuretsuchi smirked. That's what does indeed happen normally. However, you only formed a shell of hardened concrete around my personal variant of quicklime orbs. She pointed to one of the orbs near her which was cracked. And when you hit it with your sword, you broke that shell. Where do you think all the unhardened concrete went? Suigetsu's eyes widened and he looked down at his sword, which was completely encased in concrete. That's for saying I have no sex appeal. I'll let you know that I will find my significant other eventually, she growled. Never take your eye off the enemy, chum. He heard his opponent say. Turning his head back, he just managed to see her launch another barrage of Yoten. Quicklime jutsu. This time, he wasn't able to do anything because a Yoten Bunshin appeared next to him and grabbed him, keeping him in place as he was covered in concrete. Well, I'd say we have concrete evidence that Kuretsuchi of Iwa is the winner. Laxus commented, only to back away when Kuretsuchi sent him a scolding glare. Leave the fucking puns elsewhere, she growled. And 40k plus other stories all involving the RWBY universe. Yang sneezed and wondered who took her place in pulling bad puns. Back to the story. Arena 3. The two of you ready? Mihik asked. Both Yukata and Kankuro asked. Then begin. For a while, both contestants didn't move. Because each knew how the other fought and the other knew this, and both also knew the weaknesses of the other, with both again knowing that the other knew this. Please don't hold back against me, Kankuro-sama. Yukata said. I wish to see how far I have come. Kankuro blinked before nodding somberly, pulling out a scroll. I will. Black secret technique. From the scroll appeared 6 combat puppets, one that severed as a strong defender, 2 who wielded ranged weapons, 2 who carried either a sword or a scythe, and the last one made Yukata gulp because it was a trickster, built for speed more than anything else. It would swoop in whenever she lowered her guard. Naruto leaned forward, looking interested. He has definitely improved since the last time I have seen him, during the Chunin exams all those years ago. He commented. You know him, Naruto Nai? Hanabi asked. You could say that he is an enemy turned friend. Hinata answered. Though the friendship is through Kankuro's brother rather than with him. What did you do? Hanabi asked, giving Naruto a dull stare. During the invasion of Konoha 7 years ago, Gaara and I faced off in battle. I defeated him, became his friend, and ended up making him reconcile with Kankuro and Temari. Naruto shrugged. Looking back, not that impressive. If possible, Hanabi's stare turned even more dull. Back in the arena. Yukata was a simple girl. When fighting an opponent, she simply beepized his or her habits and reacted to them. She had a simple daily routine. Wake up, eat breakfast, train in the morning, meet up with Mitsuri or eat lunch, head to Gaara's office to see if there was a mission for her, if not, head back home and service her gear, eat dinner, go to sleep. She saw danger incoming, she dodged out of the way. But when danger came from 5 different directions, things weren't as simple. Futen. Kei's no hiki, she said, forming a wall of wind between her and the approaching puppets. Good reaction. You have definitely improved since last time. Kankuro said, pulling back his puppets. Aw, shucks, Kankuro-sama. Don't be like that. She said, rubbing the back of her head. Another thing about Yukata was that she was easily distracted by praise from people she knows, something that prevented her from being promoted to Jonin. And it was this distraction that Kankuro exploited. Winner, Kankuro of Suna. Mihik announced. The little girl really needs to fix that weakness of hers for all the potential she has. He muttered the last bit. Arena 4. This was less of a battle and more of a situation of Ryu trying not to get hit by Koyo, who was too bloody fast with that katana of his, not to mention the fact that Koyo pushed chakra into his blade, making it strong enough to withstand cutting through the rocks Ryu sent at him. Proctor, I forfeit. Ryu called out just as Koyo's blade stopped inches away from his neck. Koyo-sen has shown that he can counter most anything I can throw at him with little to no effort. I see no way to defeat him. Ryu explained. Makarov nodded as Koyo sheathed his sword and bowed, with Ryu returning the gesture. Winner, Koyo of Tetsu. The short old man announced. Ryu, was it? It takes strength to acknowledge that one is outmatched. It takes greater strength to admit defeat. And the greatest strength comes from learning from these occurrences. Makarov gave the Iwin in his grandfatherly smile. Ryu nodded, giving him a small smile. Ladies and gentlemen, we will take a short break as refreshments are brought out. Please ensure that you drink enough, for we still have 2 rounds to go through today. Nagenda announced. With Naruto, after the break. And all that since the last time Dad and I sent a letter. Hanabi finished recounting the last 2 months of her life. And you two never told me you were the fucking emperor and empress. She finally snapped, having hidden her shock well. Hinata smacked her behind the head lightly. Language. She admonished her sister, whilst Naruto just chuckled. We wanted it to be a surprise to you and Hiashi Otu-san. He explained. Though, it seems as though he hasn't traveled with you, has he? Hanabi sighed. He's been nominated the chief ambassador to the minor country surrounding Hai no Kuni. Hokage team sent him to one such lands a week before we left. Last I heard, he had safely arrived in the Yumi no Kuni, something about using them as a middleman to trade with other countries across the sea to the east. Naruto nodded. His agents in the elemental nations had mentioned that Yumi no Kuni was probably the only nation with open borders to Hai no Kuni, though this was about as far as the relationship went, especially after Konoha Shinobi allegedly tried to steal a sizable part of Yumi's trade fleet. Smart move on the part of that mummy. He commented. It would be better if that bastard of a Kage were to pass away, honestly. Hanabi sighed. He has turned the entire economy of Konoha and surrounding villages and town into simple sources of money to run the military, only stopping there because the daimyo personally commanded him from stopping this. Naruto and Hinata winced. That could not end well. What about the clans? Naruto asked. Can't they call for a vote of no confidence? The Kurama clan did. They were all found slaughtered the next day. Hanabi said. Danzo's route has taken over the entire Anbu and they follow Danzo's command to the letter. As long as the clans don't do anything radical, clan-born shinobi and civilians still live as they did under Gondai-sama. Naruto sighed. Seems like things were worse than he had thought. They paused to hear the next lineup of contestants. Round 5 will consist of Shikamaru Nara of Konoha vs Lady Ota, the wave dancer in Arena 1. Shikamaru looked at a silver-haired woman a year or so his senior wearing samurai armor and wielding a kanabo. A weapon he found too troublesome to want to be hit with. Leonora Volteria, 1, of the 7th Army vs Dari of Kumagakure in Arena 2. The Raikage's right-hand man looked to see his opponent and saw a beautiful white-haired lady wearing revealing, lightweight armor, ornate sword at her side, walking up to the arena. What a drab, he muttered. Tiba from Kurigakure vs Haru from Testu no Kuni in Arena 3. The 2 swordsmen glared at each other, lightning sparking between the 2 of them. You 2 know each other? Mihik asked. This bastard mocks my swordsmanship whenever we fight. The 2 contestants answer in complete synchronicity, then return to glare at each other. Stop stealing my line. And lastly, Aoi from Kurigakure vs Mary from Sunagakure in Arena 4. Aoi looked at Mary, who was studying him in turn, before nodding in greeting. In a while. He greeted her. 3 years. When Lady May came to form an alliance with us. Mary nodded. You still owe me a drink for winning that bet. You snooze, you lose. Aoi answered. Let the 5th round begin. Magenta announced. Arena 1. Shikamaru and Lady Oda remained still, studying each other, gauging their strengths and weaknesses, and Shikamaru reading her body language, smirking when he realized something. Reaching back, he saw Lady Oda tense until she saw him pull out a bag of chips and start eating them. Shikamaru stopped for a moment when he heard her stomach roar, wanting to be fed. Want some? He asked, seeing her hold her stomach whilst blushing. Come and get it. Gritting her teeth and grabbing her kanabo, Lady Oda did just that, and Shikamaru realized that he might have underestimated her. She literally danced through the wind at a speed that caught him by surprise. Sure enough, he learned why didn't want to be hit by her club. It hurt about as much as his mother's dreaded frying pan, if not considerably more so. Really? Jalapeno flavor? She asked, sniffing the chips before chewing on a handful, looking down at Shikamaru in disdain. Isn't that a bit hot? Shikamaru asked. Those chips had the hottest flavor he could handle. My family eats ghost peppers for breakfast, reapers for lunch, and devil chilies for supper. Something like this is nothing. She said, lifting another handful of chips to her mouth, and froze there. Hagime no Jutsu, success. Shikamaru said from his position on the ground, his shadow linked up with hers only 5 feet away. What is this? Lady Oda asked, unable to move. My family's secret technique. It is too troublesome to explain, so I'll have you leave the arena. Shikamaru said, still lying on the floor and controlling her movements as she walked to the edge, then over it. It is too troublesome to get up and give myself more pain than I already have, plus the clouds are nice to look at right now. He muttered. Winner, the lazy little shit from Konoha. Riza announced. Now get your arse to the seats before I have Lady Oda bat you over there. Arena 2. Barry, unlike Shikamaru and his opponent, immediately began running through hand signs. Ranton. Laser circuit, he said, sending laser beams at his opponent, who either dodged or blocked the beams with a wind barrier. Arifer, she shouted in response, sending a windstorm at him in return, before engaging him in a sword fight. What a drab. Guess I can't ask you to resign, can I? Derry asked. Sorry, but no. There are only 2 people in the world who can make me resign during a duel, my husband and the Emperor. She answered. Barry blinked. So your husband isn't henpecked? He must have a nice life indeed. He asked. And the Emperor? My husband knows what he wants and is willing to go to great lengths to get it, but not at the expense of others' lives or property. She answered. And the Emperor is a friend of the family, you could say. My husband often invites him to go hunting during hunting season. Quietly she added under her breath, and the Empress can be scary if she wants to be, but Derry didn't hear that. Friends and family are important. Derry nodded, then saw Leonora smirk. On another point, get ready to lose. She said. Really? Derry asked. Yes. We've been blade locked for all about 20 seconds now and I could gather the wind around us. She said happily, making Derry realize his great mistake and jump away, going through hand signs as he went. Peyton. Endon, he immediately called, just as Leonora unleashed the blast of air she had gathered. The resulting explosion sent both of them flying in opposite directions, with Derry flying off the arena and Leonora digging her sword into the ground just short of the edge, though she did dislocate her shoulder from the strain of her sudden deceleration. Winner by ring out, Leonora Voltaria. Laxus announced. And can the medics come over here? Got burns and dislocations here. Arena 3. Nobody really understood what was going on here. Kiba and Haru started off with a verbal conflict, then began trying to murder each other, then paused to catch their breaths, got into another verbal clash, engaged each other, whilst continuing said verbal clash, paused again to catch their breaths, again, rinse and repeat. All the while, Mihik just stood there, eyebrow quirked, wondering why the hell they were arguing about whose style of sword combat was superior, when both of them were, essentially, using the exact same style without realizing it. A style that he despised and found to be lacking in its versatility as it was designed to be a single-target style. Your mother is a whore. Haru shouted. Yeah, well your sister screamed like one yesterday in bed. Kiba returned. And at this point Mihik was considering just killing the 2 of them. This was not what he signed up for. After a few more agonizing minutes for the former warlord, Kiba managed to get under Haru's swing and send a lightning-covered fist into his face, leaving him stunned enough to hold him at sword point. Winner, Kiba of Kiri. Mihik announced. Now, the 2 of you shut up about your stupid competition and be the friends you clearly are. We're not friends. The 2 snapped at him in perfect synchronism. Arena 4. Putin. Sandstorm Mary began, covering the arena in a smokescreen sandscreen. Yoten. Lava Bunchen Aoi whispered, spitting out some of his lava and creating a perfect replica, which took his place whilst he moved a few steps to the side as his clone was suddenly beset by Mary's binding cloth. In the stands. Why didn't he use Kaiten? Yukata asked. Because of the sand. Mei answered. Had he used a fire attack, the sand would have melted and turned into molten shrapnel, with a follow-up wind jutsu that. It is the reason why Aoi lost his eye during their first battle many years ago during a mission gone south. Why did the mission go south? Kankuro asked, before his eyes widened. It can't be. Indeed. My predecessor made a deal with your father during the Third Great War. Peace between Mizu and Kase for her head. Mei sighed. Not long after the treatise was signed, Yugura launched an amphibious assault on Kase and Mary-san hates Kiri for killing her sensei. Kankuro continued. So, when her team and Aoi's team encountered each other back then. Indeed. It's also what made Aoi decide to defect to my fledgling resistance movement when he learned from Mary that Kiri betrayed them like that. Mei told him, returning her attention to the fight in the fourth arena. Back to the fight. Mary didn't let up on her attack once she realized that she'd caught a clone. She sent her cloth wiping around in an attempt to capture Aoi, who was proving himself to be quite elusive. All the while, Aoi was making more of his rubber balls a little bigger than tennis balls, but packing them full of explosive tags, flashbangs or smoke bombs, which he then rolled in Mary's general direction. After a long while, once she was surrounded by enough of them, he detonated the smoke first, forcing her to stop her attacks and use a wind jutsu to clear the air just as Aoi detonated the flashbangs. Yet, Mary was not a jonin for nothing. The moment she felt the bright light sear her retina, she began covering herself in a dome with her binding cloth, whilst pulling out a storage seal and releasing all the water it held, drenching the cloth, just as the explosive tags within the remaining balls erupted in flame and broken floor tiles. She did curse herself however for having fallen for his trick, one she'd seen him use on other shinobi before during the last war, back when she was still a genin. She also had to hand it to the mist shinobi veteran. He didn't waste time. By the time her vision had cleared, he had already cut open her cloth dome and held a kunai across her throat and another one pointed at her back where her kidney was. Mary clicked her tongue but conceded her defeat. Winner, Aoi from Kurigakure. Makarov announced to the cheers of everyone watching. Wendy, give this young lady a checkup. That much light must not have been comfortable for her. Humming, Master Makarov. Wendy said as she jogged over only to trip on a small stone and fall on her face. After a brief break during which the arenas were repaired, Najenda gave an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now be holding the last set of battles for the first round. After lunch, we will be holding the second round. Now, for the next set of battles. She grabbed a pair of slips out of the box. Ara of Sunagakure and Keat of Nadeshiko. Please head on over to Arena 1. Najenda said, taking out another set of papers. Ara walked towards his arena whilst looking at his opponent. Keat was a short-haired girl wearing the classic Nadeshiko uniform, with the exception of a pair of bladed tonfa strapped to her waist and a certain green book sticking out of her tools pouch. You read that crap? He asked, pointing at the book. It's not crap. It's fine literature. Keat countered. I'd know. I've read the entire series multiple times. Only prudes don't read these pieces of art. Ara, beneath the sand armor, felt his eyebrow twitch. In the stands, Tamari was radiating fury whilst Kankuro was making himself small, remembering the time when his sister found his own, now former, collection. He thought that Gaara before Naruto kicked his ass was scary compared to Tamari that day, he'd rather deal with crazy, psychopath, homicidal, screw-loose, short-tempered Gaara any day of the year. Jin from Iwagakure and Shiro of Nadeshiko, Arena 2. Najenda called out. Jin was a gray-brown-haired muscular old man who wore a sleeveless variant of the standard Iwa uniform. Both of his arms were covered in tribal-like tattoos. Shiro on the other hand looked like a cross between Might Guy and Hinata. Her short-sleeved uniform barely held in her slightly above-average rack, but did nothing to hide the sheer defined muscle of her limbs, denoting her as a taijutsu specialist. Her hair was a similar shade of black-blue hair as Hinata. In essence, she was comparable in size to Hinata, but with Guy's muscles, comparatively to body size. And to complete the odd look, she had a pair of trench knives holstered to her hips. And that is also where the danger flags began. Anyway. Ido of the West and Asumi of Iwagakure, Arena 3. Najenda announced. Asumi wore a variation of the Iwa uniform that resembled Kurenai's outfit, her short hair pointing in every direction and her blue eyes seemingly drilling into anyone's soul. Ido was a green-gray-haired man wearing samurai armor, holding a long pipe and casually smoking away and looking high as heck. What's wrong with you? Asumi asked, looking at the cook samurai with a twitching eyebrow. Noting. Ido answered, taking another deep drag from his pipe. Just wondering why there are two of you. But the other Western samurai. Alright, we destroyed all his stashes last week and killed all his suppliers. So how in the name of all that is holy did he get more tobacco and opium? Oda asked. How should we know? one of the other samurai. He must have found a new supplier here in the capital. At least he is manageable, even when high. Another samurai muttered. And at least he isn't drunk. Back with Najenda. And well, we have only 2 people left, they can go to Arena 4. What were their names again? Najenda asked, grabbing the last 2 slips. Kari of Kumagakure and Renji of Tetsu no Kuni. Let's get this over with. Kari said, with the Tetsu samurai nodding in agreement. Renji was a black-haired man with steel blue eyes walking with a slight limp. If you don't mind me asking, but what the hell happened for you to have a limp? Kari asked. About a month ago, I made the misfortune of encountering a certain pink-haired walking blackboard from Konoha whilst on a pilgrimage to the main Shinto shrine in Hai no Kuni. He answered. Made the near-fatal mistake of mistaking her for a guy. She certainly acted like one. But the Konoha delegation. Sakura clenched her teeth and growled, remembering that encounter. Worse still, it had made her Sasuke-kun chuckle a bit at her expense. I should have broken more than his leg back then, she hissed out. Back with Kari and Renji. Kari snickered. You talking about that one there? The one that is glaring kunai at you? Renji looked and nodded. Indeed, that's her. I see that she still looks like an effeminate guy. He then cupped his hands to his mouth and called out to Sakura, an effeminate guy who lost to a child during the very first preliminary round. A child, for God's sake. Short flashback. Sakura groaned as she was extracted from the concrete wall she had found herself in. Her opponent was a small brat, looking no more than 10 years old. Didn't matter though, since the little shit bitch slapped her, sending her flying into this damned wall, burying her up to her waist in it. If it was any consolidation, the little brat lost to Sasuke the next round, but not before revealing that he was actually an adult with a growth disability, although only a few people believed him. Flashback end. Kari snickered whilst the crowds laughed at Sakura's expense. The 2 then heard Najenda announce the start of the matches. Arena 1. Liza brought her hand down and was instantly almost crushed by the literal avalanche of sand that erupted from behind Gaara, bearing down on Kid, who immediately jumped back and sent a barrage of water orbs at the approaching sand. Beneath his sand armor, Gaara smirked. His distraction had worked. Suddenly, Kid was ensnared by a tendril of sand that appeared from below her, wrapping itself around her arms and torso, then pulling down, forcing her to her knees as more and more sand converged around her, eventually covering her from neck to toes. Surrender, unless you want me to break your bones. Gaara ordered. Never, Kid began, but then let out a pained cry as Gaara crushed one of her hands, Riza flinching from the sound of crunching bones. Alright, I give. Winner by forfeit, Gaara from Sunagakure. Riza announced. Medics, we have a busted hand and arm here. Arena 2. Jin learned 3 lessons during his fight with Shiro. Lessons he probably should have learned years ago. Not in order. Lesson number 1. Don't underestimate a girl who looks like she can knock your block off. Lesson number 2. Don't brag about having beaten, raped and murdered an Nadeshiko Kunoichi during the last war that Kunoichi may have been, let's say, Shiro's mother. Lesson number 3. Don't call any woman ugly simply because she doesn't fit your criteria of what is beautiful and what isn't. Granted, his type was essentially purely housewife material, not experienced Kunoichi, but still. And on to how he learned these very important lessons. Lesson number 1. Barely 3 seconds after claiming that the fight will be a cakewalk, after Laxus started the match, he found himself with a black eye, 2 missing teeth and a dislocated arm from a multi-hit combo she delivered on him. Lesson number 2. Before claiming that the fight will be a cakewalk, he boasted about his conquest to her about the last Nadeshiko Kunoichi he had faced in battle, and what followed next was the aforementioned beating he received for lesson 1 above. Lesson number 3. After coming back to his senses, he insulted her, calling her things like a disgrace to all females in existence for not being a housewife, resulting in her giving him an eerie smile. Not a housewife, is it? And what exactly do housewives in your dumb imagination use? She asked, subtly removing a scroll from her pouch. Pots, pans and other cooking and household utensils. Jin answered, too angry to notice the danger. Pans like this? Shiro said, having quickly looked through the scroll until she found the correct seal. In her hands appeared a ridiculously large frying pan. Jin wouldn't return to active service for a year and would flinch whenever he saw his wife so much as touched any kitchen utensil. Winner, Shiro of Nadeshiko. Laxus announced, before beginning to sweat slightly. Someone should have warned him about blabbering like that beforehand. Shizuka commented. I agree, however he is a staunchly loyal Jonin War veteran. It's a pity he didn't get a chance to show of his true potential. He has all sorts of hidden gimmicks hidden around his persona. Kuretsuchi said. And why is your subordinate looking at the proctor like he is a prime steak grilled medium rare? Shizuka shook her head. She just found someone who fits the criteria we Nadeshiko Kunoichi look for when hunting for our husbands. Single, attractive and powerful. Off in the stands, a certain white-haired S-class mage felt more than a little twitch in her eyebrows seeing Shiro's actions. Arena 3. Mihik sighed. He knew Ido only in passing and was vaguely interested in his unique brand of swordsmanship, somehow managing to invent the drunken sword style. Like the name suggests, it is similar to the drunken fist style of Taijutsu, only for Kenjutsu. But Ido wasn't drunk right now, so the Iwa Kunoichi was holding her own against a slightly older male, who half the time swung completely wide, telling her to stop swapping places with her doppelganger. That does not mean that she was having it easy though. Thus far she had only been able to land a few glancing blows as, despite being as high as the clouds, Ido was still as nimble as a certain big fat lazy panda dodging cannonballs whilst standing on a floating piece of debris. "Pull up," he suddenly said. "I'm getting thirsty." Before taking a few swigs from the gourd on his belt. Up in the stands. "Well, there he goes," one Western samurai said, shaking his head in defeat. "Odds above, he will be insufferable once the alcohol wears off." Another samurai on the other side of Oda commented. "I wouldn't be so sure yet. That young lady also seems to have an ace up her sleeve," Oda said, pointing at Asumi's hands which were stealthily going through several hand seals. "Back with the fighters." "Alrighty then, come on then all three of you," Ido said, swaying from side to side, pointing his sword either directly at her or a bit to either side of her. "You know, it is good that these arenas are this small," Asumi said. "Doten. Her and Izumi no Kaisei, hedgehog formation." All around her, the ground suddenly erupted with numerous stone spikes that spread out across the arena floor, making Ido jump back and be forced into a corner. And Asumi wasn't finished yet either. "Raiden. Raijin no Kekai," she said as electricity leapt from her to one of the spikes, then another, and another, all of which shot off to another spike, sometimes linking up with another mass of electricity, other times splitting up into two or more charges. Ido, despite his state of mind, realized that this combination of techniques was bad business. Especially when all that electricity suddenly accelerated straight for him. "Lightning strike," he said, cutting the first electrical strike, dodging the second, and being hit by the third and following strikes, because Asumi had burrowed underground and grabbed his right ankle, A, preventing him from moving and B, distracting him from the real attack. "Winner, Asumi of Iwa." Mihik announced moments before Asumi cried out in pain as she felt the muscle on her forearm having been nearly severed by Ido's final strike when he tried to cut of her arm in order to regain his mobility. "Medics. We have a priority 1 here," he called out, seeing that her primary artery had been cut. Arena 4. "You are not going to use ninjutsu, are you?" Renji asked. Perry shook her head. "Unlike most shinobi, I take pride in my kenjutsu skills. And it isn't often that I get to engage in a duel with a fellow kenjutsu specialist or a practitioner of Bushido. Using ninjutsu would hurt my pride." Renji nodded, secretly relieved. He did not want to be on the opposing side of another ninjutsu barrage. Been there, done that, never want to do that again kind of thing, you know. "You may begin," Makarov announced. For a moment, neither side moved, with the one sizing up the other. Then both of them moved. With a loud clang, their swords met. The crowds cheered as the two of them seemingly danced around the arena. Even Kakashi was surprised at the prowess these two showed. And Sasuke was pissed because there was some sort of barrier around the arenas that prevented him from copying their techniques. Well, not that he was smart enough to realize there was a barrier. The Sharingan can only see chakra constructs after all, something that Rimuru doesn't have. After a while the two combatants disengaged. "After the tournament, we should spar more often," Renji said. "If it helps improve the frosty nature of Utetsu Samurai, why not?" Carrie commented. "I mean, you all come from that ice palace you call a country." "Shut up. At least we only have a frosty nature," Renji countered. "Which is still better than Konoha's so-called Kunoichi with a burning temper." He roared towards a certain pinkhead. Perry chuckled. "If the situation allows, we should meet up more back home." Renji smirked. "You happen to be my type, so why not?" In the stands. Amoy heard this, then began to mutter his nonsense again, which was silenced by Lady Oda, who gave him a simple and easily understood ultimatum. "Shut up or else." Whilst menacingly holding her kanabo in her hands. Reason? Well, for once, Amoy wasn't spouting end-of-world stuff. No, he was fretting that Carrie had just found her future husband and would burden him with the duty of babysitting their kids when they were out, then them dying and leaving him to look after their kids. All of which had made Lady Oda self-conscious about her still single status and the fact that she hadn't found anyone yet who caught her fancy. Back in the arena. The two combatants continued exchanging blows, their smiles growing with each engagement until Renji's injured leg became too much for him and disengaged, though Carrie didn't stop her assault and forced him to give ground until eventually he stepped out of bounds. "Winner, Carrie of Kumo." Makarov announced as Carrie slung Renji's arm over her shoulder and helped him to the stands where the medics would look at his leg. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a 2-hour break for lunch, then the tournament will continue with the second round of battles. Najenda announced, and together with the 4 referees, turned to walk out of the stadium as the spectators stood to do the same. With Naruto. So, lil sis. Naruto began only to have Hanabi glare at him. I'm only 2 inches shorter than you, don't call me lil sis. She snapped, though her glare lost all its heat. Naruto chuckled. Sorry, but the nickname fits since you are my little sister-in-law. Hinata giggled behind her hand. Anyway, want to have lunch with us? Sorry, but I already have plans with Mogi, Yuden and Konohamaru. Hanabi answered. Konohamaru is here? Naruto asked, surprised. Hanabi nodded. My friendship with him is more through Mogi, but he's cute with how he tries and fails to woo Mogi, who clearly isn't interested in him in that way. Oh, is that a crush I hear in your voice? Hinata asked. No comment. Hanabi answered, looking kinda red as she turned her face away from them. Now, I gotta go find Mogi and the others. She turned on her Byakugan, blinked in surprise, then whispered something into Hinata's ear, which left Hinata looking stunned. See you 2 later, Nai-san, Wani-sama. Naruto blinked, then turned to look at Hinata, who was still frozen. What did she tell you? He asked. So Naruto turned to his wife with a questioning look as they sat down at the table in the small restaurant, the Gentle Breeze. It was a homely little joint away from the hustle and bustle of the main streets, roads and avenues where the majority of the city's populace are usually. Despite this, it has a large group of dedicated clientele that keep the shop open, the royal family being amongst this group. What did Lulsis tell you that has kept you so quiet till now? I am not sure if I should tell you or not, Hinata answered, twiddling her fingers. Come on. Naruto told her with smile. Whose big secret is it? Hinata sighed. You'll probably find out soon anyway, but when Hanabi was looking for Mogi-san, she spotted Niji and Karen having an intimate moment. Naruto looked at her blankly. He does know that Karen and Tayuya pretty much share everything, right? He commented, referring to the fact that the 2 Redeeds have been in an on and off relationship ever since Karen joined their little group back in Kawano Kuni. Those 2 were basically inseparable and even roomed together. Had Naruto known better, he probably wouldn't have made a cheesy comment about them ending up sharing a husband later on in life. A comment that got him a week's worth running for his life from 2 angry girls, one of whom, wheelchair be damned, was going to, quote, rip of your beep and shove it up your ass so far you can taste it in your mouth. End quote. Oh, I am sure that Tayuya doesn't know yet she was complaining about Niji again during our last girls' day out. Hinata said, before narrowing her eyes. So that is why Karen was so quiet that day, Naruto. She looked around, looking for her husband who seemingly had just disappeared. Hinata was about to activate her Byakugan when a loud "they what?" echoed through the streets of Midgard, and Hinata couldn't help but shake her head and smile at the chaos that Naruto had just unleashed onto their city. In the meantime, she would look for Niji to witness the fallout. With Naruto, moments earlier. Naruto found Tayuya at her usual place in the main square, giving music lessons to street urchins and orphans, something she does when not spending time with her friends, Naruto and Ko and some others, or is performing on stage or chazzing people around who simply wanted to ask her for her hand in marriage. Good day, Lord Emperor. The kids greeted in chorus. Good day, young ones. May I speak with Tayuya, please? He asked the kids, making Tayuya lightly glare at him since he made it sound she was theirs to share. But hey, they're kids. The kids nodded and left the 2 to talk. What you need? Tayuya asked. Niji and Karen were making out earlier. Naruto told her bluntly, then prepared for the storm. He wasn't disappointed. They what? Tayuya screamed, her hair flaying around in anger. I am sure that Karen will share him with you. Naruto said smoothly, making Tayuya freeze, and Naruto could have sworn he saw her cheeks flush for a moment. Take me to them now. She calmly told Naruto, who could see the Oni mask appear behind her. Not long after. Hinata, Naruto and Tayuya arrived in the tea garden at roughly the same time, and whilst Hinata hid behind some hedges with her ocular abilities active, Naruto walking over to his wife and Tayuya casually walking up behind the 2 oblivious individuals, sharing a pot of tea under the pavilion. Loudly clearing her throat, she got their attention. And Hinata held back a giggle at seeing all color drain from their faces. I have heard over the bloody wind that someone hasn't informed me of certain developments. Tayuya started, making the couple look at each other with flushed faces. I can explain, Karen began, but was interrupted by Tayuya. You can explain later after answering one question. Tayuya looked them both in the eyes, neither one being able to keep it for long. Mind if we share him? I guess that is one way to get into a relationship. Naruto commented to Hinata, who was still giggling. Let's give them some space. We can ask them all about it later. Hinata said between giggles. I'll cook some ramen for lunch. Now that got Naruto's full attention. 2 hours later, arena. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second round of battles. Najenda spoke into the microphone, earning cheers from the crowd. We will be keeping the same format as last round, 4 battles apiece. She continued. In Arena 1, Koyo from Tetsu no Kuni and Monkey D. Luffy. In Arena 2, Natsu Dragneel and Carry from Kumagakure. In Arena 3, A from Kumagakure, Mifune from Tetsu no Kuni and Irachi of the West. In Arena 4, Might Guy from Konohagakure and Legolas Greenleaf of the Elven Realm. 1. As the 9 contestants made their way to their arenas, the 4 referees shuffled their locations. Now, it was Makarov at Arena 1, Riza at Arena 2, Laxus at Arena 3 and Mihik at Arena 4. In Arena 1. Makarov looks at Koyo and at Luffy. Both contestants ready? He asked, getting nods in return. Well, a nod and a huge smile from Luffy. Begin. Shushi. I hope you are a better fighter than that girl from last time. No comment. Koyo responded. I prefer not to make such judgments on people who lost due to unknown abilities. My last opponent, Ryu, just didn't have the experience for fighting fast opponents, but he did well enough. That's good. Luffy said before sending a hockey-enhanced fist straight for Koyo's face. Sidestepping to the side, Koyo discovered with a frown that his katana bounced harmlessly of the now black skin that covered most of Luffy's forearm. So instead he did the next logical thing in his opinion. Charge. Getting in close, he started attacking Luffy with everything he had, but Luffy dodged and weaved through the dance of steel, all the while extending his arms behind him. Gomu no. Well, my time in this world was short but beautiful, Koyo thought, hearing Luffy. Bazooka. Sure enough, Koyo was sent flying, his armor broken to pieces, and his ribs cracked. Fortunately, Luffy had enough brain cells to send him flying towards the medics. Makarov meanwhile quirked an eyebrow at Luffy. Observation hockey. And armament hockey. Wasn't that a tad overkill? He wanted a challenge. Luffy commented. Makarov sighed and declared the pirate navy captain the winner. Now, where's the meat? Arena 2. Perry was finding new definitions for the term bullshit. No, seriously, this salmon head eats fire and lightning. And follows up his snack by indiscriminately burning everything within close proximity to her. Proctor, what bullshit is this? She asked Riza. That would be called indiscriminate firepower. Riza answered in her usual blunt attitude. Oh, and better watch out. He uses lightning as well. What? Was all Carrie could say before she was engulfed in an electrified inferno. Natsu? Natsu cut of his flames and looked towards where his guildmates were sitting. How many times have we told you to hold back when fighting a girl? I am holding back. He shouted back. I haven't moved from this spot since the fight began. Even from where he stood, he could see Lisana and Lucy facepalming, whilst Gagiel standing next to them nodded in complete agreement with Natsu's statement. After all, Natsu hadn't gone in for melee combat. Winner, Natsu Dragneel. Riza announced as she saw the burnt form of Carrie lying on the floor. Medics, got a priority too here. Major burns and unresponsive. Meanwhile, off in the Nadeshiko section, a certain Kunoichi whimpered in fear, remembering her very recent trauma. Arena 3. Laxus would never have believed it. In a shocking turn of events, the moment he started the match, A was engulfed in lightning, blitzed over to Irachi, who was unprepared for the sheer speed the large man moved at, lariated him off the arena floor, then began indiscriminately attacking Mifune using various lightning techniques, which earned him a number of deep cuts, especially on his arms and one on his neck. But he eventually was able to land a deciding blow that sent the leader of the Eastern Samurai sliding off the arena. He would later, whilst in a discussion with his closest subordinates, confess that had there not been a size limit on the arena, Mifune could have defeated him, since the old samurai had turned the fight into a battle of attrition, and A's techniques drain a lot of chakra. And, quote, that damned sword style of his is so log-damned annoying. Arena 4. Legolas had come to a startling conclusion. He underestimated the Eastern warriors. Granted, he had easily won against that overthinking samurai from Tetsu, and yes, he rarely ever got to fight anyone from that continent, but still, he had become overconfident. Because he was once again learning what it meant to be punched in the face by someone who has the strength of an angry dwarf, agility that rivals, if not surpasses his own, a brutal fighting style that hurt a lot, and all this before he opened something called the fourth gate. Off to the side, Makarov winced at the barrage of punches and kicks that Might Guy was delivering upon the Elven Prince. Amended meaning. He winced at the sound of cracking ribs, flying teeth and the black eye that Legolas ended up with. Winner, Might Guy of Konoha. He called out just as Guy was about to deliver a right hook, stopping a few inches from Legolas' face. Forgive me, Prince, but he outclassed you there. Hardly agree with you, fear, Legolas said through his missing front teeth as Guy held him up and over to the rushing medics. With Naruto and Hinata. "So, where is the real you?" Hinata asked Naruto. "The boss is busy snacking on popcorn and ginger beer over there with Konohamaru and his merry gang." The now revealed shadow clone pointed at some location in the stands near where the Konoha delegation stood. "Also, that rude agent who snuck away from the delegation shortly after arriving. He just tried to break into the royal palace." Skull and the rest of the Empress's guard caught him whilst he broke through the window into their changing room. "I am assuming he won't survive long enough to interrogate." Hinata shook her head. "Wait, how do you know this?" One of the paperwork clones popped after they heard the feminine roars of fury coming from that side of the palace, and a second one popped after one of Skull's lieutenants came to report what happened and then quickly left to join in on the beating. The clone answered. "And Siri?" Hinata asked. "Last I heard, she's getting a specialist to help clean up the mess," came the answer. "Remind me to bake a large cake for the wolf school," Hinata commented. "Ara, what did the real you do to make my sister that red-faced?" Moments earlier, with the real Naruto. "So, how have things been for you, boss?" Konohamaru asked, eating popcorn while seeing that girl from Kumo being roasted. "All things considered, busy," Naruto responded before holding his pack of popcorn to Yuden and Miyogi, who gladly took some, whilst Hanabi was nabbing some from Konohamaru. After the war, reconstruction began. "Hinata and I haven't had a chance to take a few days off since our honeymoon a few years ago." "What's it like, being married?" Konohamaru asked, not seeing Hanabi freeze momentarily and gaining a small blush. "That is something best reserved to be experienced firsthand," Naruto told him with a smirk. "In other words, you just don't want to talk about it?" Hanabi asked. "That bad, huh?" Naruto quirked an eyebrow at her. "I seem to recall you asking that same question to Hinata via letters a few months ago. And Hiashi Otu-san stating in his letter to give you the same answer as I just gave Konohamaru." Mogi, Yuden and Konohamaru giggled at Hanabi, whose cheeks were colored a bright red. "Damn older siblings and father," she grumbled out under her breath, not finding anything to refute the statement. "Anyway, Konohamaru," Naruto began. "Have you found any girl you like yet?" "Nope," Konohamaru answered. "Too busy being chased by fangirls who want me for being a clan heir." "You told us you had it under control," Mogi and Yuden commented. "That was the civilian group. I am talking about the rest of our grade's girls. Apart from you and Hanabi-chan, all the girls from our grade are horny fangirls." Konohamaru sighed. "Hey, they aren't that bad." Mogi snapped, with Hanabi nodding in agreement. "When you last spoke with them, what was the main topic they spoke about?" Konohamaru asked them with a deadpan expression. Neither girl wanted to answer it because they knew that he was right. "Iruka-sensei did say something about our class's female population being worse than Naruto's generation," Mogi thought to herself. "How would you know this?" Hanabi asked. "Boss's famous prank henge," Konohamaru responded. "Got my mom to lend me a few of her old clothes. Wanted to prank them, but got dragged into a BBQ restaurant by some civilian chatterboxes. Unfortunately, the booths next to us were occupied by the fan club and they spoke about nothing but finding ways to have their way with me." "That bad, huh?" Naruto hid a frown by taking a drink. "Oh, cheer up, Konohamaru. I am sure that you'll find a young brunette firecracker somewhere near you that'll keep you feel happy and safe," he said with a smirk. A smirk that grew when he saw the red-faced glare that Hanabi sent him, whilst Konohamaru was sitting there clueless at the massive hint he had just dropped. Mogi and Yuden meanwhile were trying not to break out laughing. Back to the fights. Agenda walked forward again to announce the next matchups. Grabbing two slips, she announced, "Shizuka of Nadeshiko and Shiro of Nadeshiko, please go to Arena 1. Izumi Curtis of the West and Gilmy, son of Gloin, to Arena 2. Leonora Voltaria of the West and Subaku no Gara from Sunagakure to Arena 3. Kuritsuchi of Iwagakure and Kankuro of Sunagakure to Arena 4. In Arena 1. May the best Kunoichi win, Shizuka-sama," Shiro said whilst giving her leader a salute. "Agreed, Shiro-san," Shizuka responded. In Arena 2. "This axe was passed down to me by my forebears," Gimli said, holding up his twin-sided axe. "And this one was forged by mine father when I came of age." "And I should be interested why exactly?" Izumi asked, not really caring for the details. "Because the last time one of my people sparred with you, and all the times before that as well, you destroyed family heirlooms and weapons tools that hold great significance to us dwarves," Gimli shouted, actually making her jump. "I am asking you not to destroy mine weapons, unless you wish to be cut off from the good dwarven ale and mead you seem to be so fond of." "No promises," Izumi said, outwardly calm but inwardly cringing, thinking that she'd need a mug of ale to drown her sorrow of not scrapping another weapon today. Arena 3. Gara stood on the arena floor, looking towards the entrance where he saw his white-haired opponent bickering with a pink-haired hunter, who seemed to be fretting about her arm, which was hanging limply at her side. Proctor-san. He turned to Mihik. What is going on with Eleonora-san? Mihik looked to Eleonora and Tiger. Oh, she dislocated her arm during the last round and her husband is trying to dissuade her from competing, something about her arm not having been given time to heal. Gara raised an eyebrow. Those two lovebirds fret over every small thing that happens to the other, including her sister wives, but when something happens to themselves, they don't give a damn. Mihik explained. At least young Tida isn't, never mind. Gara turned just in time to see a young female with light chestnut hair drag Eleonora by her healthy arm back through the entrance, where a platinum blonde woman stood with a disapproving frown, whilst a team of doctors just stood there shaking their head before following the pair. Meanwhile, Tiger came jogging towards Arena 3 and informed Mihik and Gara that Eleonora is withdrawing from the tournament due to her injuries and added something about Tida and La Militia not allowing it either. Mihik looked at Gara, who shrugged. Compliments on wanting to fight despite her injuries. Is she what they call henpecked? The retard asked. Mihik chuckled. You have no idea. He then spoke into a microphone. Winner by default, Gara of Sunagakure. Arena 4. Makarov had always believed that people should be more honest with their opinions. Something that has definitely become the norm within his guild, especially Natsu and Gray, who honestly believed that action number COUGHBRAWLSANDFIGHTINGCOUGH number could solve any disagreements. And your home is colored like. Have you seen your own architecture? Well, allow the old man to make an amendment to his beliefs. He'd prefer his brats to destroy the interior of the guild hall rather than the verbal battle going on between the Suna puppeteer and the Iwa Kinoichi right now. Kids these days. Where did all the profanity come from? I'm getting too fucking old for this shit. The old guildmaster sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Seriously, where does the profanity come from? The end. So how was this part? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this part with your friends and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.